Welcome to a new realm of insights into the Korean Peninsula. At Korea Risk Group, we delve deep into the complexities of North and South Korea, offering bespoke analyses that empower decision makers. Whether you're in government, business, or academia, our tailored solutions provide clarity in an opaque region. Let our team guide your strategy with data-driven insights and on-the-ground intelligence. Step into a world of informed decision-making and visit KoreaRiskGroup.com today. Hello listeners and welcome to the NK News podcast for the week beginning Monday the 5th of February. This is our second roundtable episode for the year in which we discuss some of the recent stories that have been covered on NK News and NK Pro. Today I'm joined in the studio by Colin Zwirko to my left, Anton Sokolin in front of me and Yifeng Bremer also in front of me. Welcome back on the show, colleagues.
Hello.
Hello.
All right, Yifeng, tell me, what theme will we start off with today?
Yeah, I wanna talk about a story I did with Jacob Bogle. He's one of the guys who researches North Korea based on satellite imagery.
Ah.
And we just did a story together.
Wait, is he taking work away from you, Colin? You're pretty good with the satellite imagery.
There's plenty of room in the space.
Okay, the pie's big enough for all of us. All right, take us back to the satellite pie, Yifeng.
Yeah, so what he found is that North Korea added or renovated some 505 kilometers of coastal fencing around their borders.
Okay, wait, which coast are we talking about here?
East and west.
Oh, okay,
Yeah.
wow. 500 kilometers on both sides of the Korean Peninsula.
Yeah, so what that means is that now almost all of the North Korea's coast is fenced off. And you have to imagine these are often electrified fences.
Wow.
So beaches are very difficult for most people to access.
Mm-hmm.
And that's on top of the northern border and the southern border.
Yes.
Because the northern border, they also added all the fencing during COVID, even more fencing, more layers of fencing along the rivers.
Right.
Exactly. So what you now have is basically during the pandemic that North Korea really used that time to reinforce fencing all over the country and
Wow.
all along all of its borders, including the sea.
Now, if fencing, is that hard to see from a satellite image? You're looking from above, a fence isn't very thick.
It's actually more easy than you'd expect because it's often a very straight line and it's very unnatural. It's definitely you can see a clear difference between the natural landscape and this straight line just cutting through everything.
And when you compare back to the previous image, you can see a change that is like a line.
Yes. So you
Okay.
imagine a forest,
Yep.
and in 2019, and then the same place you see it on satellite imagery in 2022, and suddenly there's a line going straight through the forest. That's basically how you recognize these fences.
Oh, okay, so it's not necessarily always on the beach, but it's somewhere near the coast.
It's near the coast, so
Okay.
it can be on a beach, it can
Right.
be along a harbor,
Right.
anything like that. And why this is interesting is
Yeah.
basically because South Korean government predicted that we will see more defections by boat because the border with China
Yep.
has been reinforced so much, and that is traditionally the most common route to defect. And indeed, last year we saw two group defections by boat,
Right.
both on the West Sea and East Sea,
Yep.
of, in one case, a family coming from Gangwon-do in North Korea
Yep.
to the Gangwon-do in South Korea.
And these are often fishing boats, aren't they?
These are often fishing boats, yeah.
Mhm.
So it seems that North Korea is attempting to make these sea defections even also harder. So this leaves very little options for North Koreans who want to escape to actually get out of the country.
Right. Now, are there also watch posts or guard posts or other installations along that 500 kilometers of new fencing that North Korea has put up on the coast?
Yeah, so we also spotted guard posts added.
Mm-hmm.
We cannot see on satellite imagery how advanced these guard posts are. I recently visited the South Korean border here, the South Korean border with North Korea, and then I saw that they added pretty advanced infrared cameras, but we can't see that basically from satellite imagery. So we don't know how advanced these guard posts are, if they are manned or not.
Mm-hmm.
But either way, yeah, a lot's been happening the past 3 years along the coasts.
Yep.
And bad news for North Koreans who want to escape.
Right. So the purpose here is to stop people from leaving the country. That's, I guess, something that North Korea has had in common with other socialist regimes during the years, that it's considered a crime to want to leave and to try to leave the republic.
Yeah, but the way the North Korean government defended these offenses, the adding offenses to its own population, was saying, hey, we're trying to prevent COVID coming in by animals who could also enter
Right.
via beaches.
Where was that defense from?
That's basically what defectors told me that
It was
they were
being
told.
distributed.
Oh, I see.
Okay.
Distributed locally to communities. That was, the reasoning from the state why this was necessary. Yeah.
Right.
You can see
So-
these posters up all over North Korea that have during COVID that have all these animals with the crossed out line through them.
What's the sort of animal number one that's representative of having COVID in North Korea?
I don't know, but I'd have to relook at the poster.
Well, okay, so I'm going to just say capybara because that's the animal that comes to mind. So imagine a capybara that's trying to swim into North Korea from China, and these fences are basically set up to keep these awful COVID-infected swimming capybaras out of North Korea.
Well,
Okay.
possibly.
It's
But,
dangerous
but-
times.
Yeah.
I mean, this also affects livelihood of people.
Well,
People
yes.
live from the beach.
Right, there are in the mudflats there's a lot of crabs and shellfish that comes from under the sea,
For example,
under the beach, right,
yeah.
the sand, yeah.
So what's now happening is that these beaches are still accessible, but usually from one entry point, and that entry point will be heavily guarded.
Right, and there may be curfew times or times when the gate is open or closed. You know.
Perhaps, yeah.
Yeah, as used to be the case along the coast of Gangwon-do here in South Korea.
Right.
Right, that you used to only be able to go out to the beach at certain times, and then other times the gate would be closed.
They always talk about trying to regain central cabinet control over things like fishing industry. And
Right.
Peter Ward has written about that for us in the past. I don't know when, but about how the fishing has been an enterprise that people can kind of have their own business going, where you pay some taxes, but it's your own kind of thing, and so they want to control all that, and maybe this will help them. I don't know about efficiency, but it'll help them get control of that.
Quite possibly, yeah.
Now, Ifan, you've done a lot of stories on defectors in the last year. Numbers did go up last year, didn't they?
They went up, but we're still talking about, several dozen of defectors.
Okay.
I don't have the numbers on the top of my head, but
right.
it's
And
still...
many of those are people who had been in China for a long time, rather than people who
Yes.
are recently leaving North Korea.
Yes. So actually people who defect straight from North Korea, who escape from North Korea are very, very few still.
Yeah, so I guess looking at the big picture, coupling the erection of these fences together with efforts to stop information coming to North Korea, it's becoming, these are clearly efforts by the North Korean government to really isolate the population and stop movement of people, information, other things.
Yes, and one factor that we also have to take in account is that China also added a lot of high-tech border security the past couple of years. So we
Right,
got
motion
some
detection. And,
we got photos from the border, which also a story I covered a couple months ago that showed that in the past 2 years, China also added extensive new fencing and cameras. So all in all, very, very bad news for any North Korean who wants to escape.
right,
Yeah.
wow.
That's very sad.
It is. Thanks for that, Ifan. Anton, what shall we talk about with you today?
So yeah, guys, I would like to talk about this recent spat between Moscow and Seoul over North Korea. So we all heard that North Korea launched so many cruise missiles over last week. And
I've lost count. It's more than 10.
Well, they don't count the missiles, right? They say multiple missiles were launched, so we know only missile events. Let's call it like that.
Yeah.
And there's been about four right now. And you can say that firing missiles is sort of an escalation right on the Korean Peninsula. And kind of unexpectedly, Moscow started slamming the US and South Korea for basically provoking North Korea to start firing those missiles. And that is quite interesting. It started with Yoon's remarks about North Korea, Yoon Suk-yeol, President of South Korea, about North Korea being an irrational bunch because it reserved its unique right to a nuclear preemptive strike. And of course, for some reason, Moscow just decided to take a very proactive stance, kind of advocate for North Korea, and said a whole bunch of unpleasant stuff against Yoon Suk-yeol. saying that whatever he was saying didn't make sense, and of course started pointing fingers at the US, saying that, look, they are actually the ones who once used nuclear weapons, and Moscow's point was that the South Korean president didn't know what he was saying. Of course, naturally, it triggered a response from Seoul, and there was a huge exchange of heated messages. Even the Russian ambassador to South Korea, the new Russian ambassador to South Korea, was summoned to the foreign ministry. Can you imagine, on the weekend, on Saturday?
Right.
And about the same time, Russia's top nuclear envoy, actually, who's in charge of the Asia Pacific, and plus he also deals with nuclear issues, especially on the Korean Peninsula, visited Seoul in an unannounced visit, and that which was announced only a few days afterwards. And this all adds so much confusion, so many things happening. And I think it's a very interesting development. We should definitely keep an eye on it. And it definitely adds a bit of a new turn to this escalation.
But so Russia has been saying that this is their line for a long time now. Ever since, I mean, just going back to like talking about how sanctions should be lifted in the last couple of years, because their argument is that North Korea has a right to missile development, and such tests can be, to play devil's advocate, can be viewed as just developmental, especially because South Korea has launched dozens of missiles in the last year that no one talks about, and no one calls that an escalation. So it's all about UN sanctions. But if Russia argues that, then it's really just about Yoon wading into the argument, because then Russia will have to repeat their argument against Yoon, right? So I guess I'm curious about this balancing act that Seoul has been playing up until now. And right, like I think you mentioned earlier about how even just a week before, the new ambassador to Seoul was saying things about how important the relationship was. So what do you think it is about Yoon wading into it? Did he change tact? Was he not wading into it before?
Well, it's extremely interesting that you brought this up. Indeed, this Russian new ambassador, he tried to appease the South Korean public, saying that, well, we want to maintain normal neighborly relations with Russia as long as Seoul doesn't cross certain red lines. And this red line basically is Seoul not sending lethal weapons to Ukraine. And that was the most important part in his speech, that as long as Seoul stays out of it, we can be friends. And then
I think Seoul's been careful not to do that, though, haven't they? Has Seoul done that already?
Even as North Korea and Russia trade weapons?
Well, it's actually very important, because we know that Yoon has mentions many times, on several occasions, he mentioned that the probability of a more proactive approach towards Ukraine, but then at the same time he backtracked and tried to maintain this very delicate balance.
Right.
And suddenly we hear his remarks towards North Korea, and talking about his position. It's very interesting. I don't think it was very well calculated when he actually said that.
Wait, did he say something against Russia, or was he only talking about
North Korea?
So it was Russia who waded in.
Yes, exactly.
Okay. Well,
that's why it's interesting, because Russia basically is playing the role of this spokesperson of North Korea, and that's why it's funny. And
but it is kind of their line consistently, like how Russia or North Korea's weapons tests are not provocative.
It is true, but at the same time, it's quite rare when it actually steps in like this so proactively, and especially when it comes from the Russian Foreign Ministry spokesperson, who clearly basically calls Yoon Suk-yeol out and says that he doesn't understand what he's doing. That is quite strange. And the Kremlin itself normally tries to not to weigh in these topics and trying to maintain the balance. So it was clearly either an error or a calculated step within the foreign ministry of Russia.
When was that? How long?
Just a few days ago.
Is it going to keep going, or is it are they both trying to like?
I think they're trying to diffuse the tensions, because obviously it's not leading anywhere, right? It's she said, he said, and this type of situation.
But there is this ongoing double standard, isn't there? That North Korea has military armaments.
They've shipped missiles. Come on.
Yeah.
Missiles, artillery.
Missiles and artillery and things to Russia to use in its war against Ukraine. And then Russia says to South Korea, don't you dare do that, on the other side. There's a bit of a double standard there. And I guess sometimes when you're caught in a double standard or you're caught in some hypocrisy, the best response is to shout loudly and pretend it never happened. And Russia seems to be taking that approach.
Yeah.
That is a very good point. But at the same time, we need to remember that it could be a calculated also approach from Moscow by basically taking in North Korean arms and sending by this a signal to Seoul not to get involved in Ukraine, because by this North Korea gets a very nice testing grounds for its missiles that can be eventually later maybe hypothetically used against South Korea. And by being close with North Korea, Moscow basically just sends this message that do not get involved in this, and that could be part of the game. And it's not only me saying this; it's several experts.
So, as of the time of this recording on Tuesday, the 7th, the 6th, is it still? Are tensions still high between Moscow and Seoul, or are we on a de-escalation phase? Where are we?
I'm still keeping my eye on it. It's shortly after this Russian nuclear envoy visited Seoul. Clearly, there were some behind-the-doors conversations, and clearly there were certain steps towards the de-escalation, and hopefully it will somehow just vanish into thin air. But who knows? The Russian foreign ministry spokesperson is a very unpredictable woman, and we all know how sometimes she can just toss very unexpected remarks out of nowhere. So,
Wow. What's the name of the new Russian ambassador?
Georgy Zinoviev.
So, Ambassador Zinoviev, if you're listening, we'd love to have you on the NK News podcast.
Absolutely, come over.
Do come over. It's a short walk from the embassy. We'll have a chat.
What does Seoul lose out on if Russia decides to use its leverage and say, okay, well, even though North Korea is sending us missiles, if you send missiles to Ukraine, then we will do XYZ against our economic relations. What will Seoul lose out on? Oil or?
So you're saying if Seoul does engage in this supplies of weapons to Ukraine.
They have the justification right now because of the North Korea-Russia relation. But just because you have the justification doesn't mean Russia won't retaliate. So then they would ostensibly retaliate.
So how could Russia retaliate against Seoul in economic ways?
Better way to say it.
Well, we're already seeing, right, that the South Korean businesses are leaving Russia. There's so many factors are being put on hold. This is quite an important part of it. It's an important aspect because in South Korea, it's my impression, but I suppose for South Korea, the Russian market is quite important because it's not only just about Russia, it's about Central Asia and about Eastern Europe as well. And it's a very important transportation hub. So if you get cut off of these routes, well, you lose out. You will have to ship everything by sea. And at the same time, there's been so many joint projects, again, in the energy sector, in the transportation sector between Russia and South Korea that are just too valuable to lose.
Well, a question without notice, you may not be able to answer this. Is Korean Air currently flying to Russian cities and over Russian territory?
No. South Korea joined Western sanctions against Russia and seized all civilian flights to Russia, which is why the only way to get actually from Russia or to South Korea is either by ferry or by third country. And
Wow.
And also, maybe this is not such a big sector as energy, but here in South Korea, we love our fish. A lot of the fish is caught in Russian waters, especially with global warming as the seas warm up. For example, squid.
Yep.
Going up north.
How much of that is really North Korean then passed through the Russian market?
Oh, that's a good question.
Yeah, that's another
one thing
question.
to look into.
Yeah. I think that I did see a story some years ago that suggested that within a few years, rather than fish, we'll all have to start eating jellyfish because that's pretty much all that can grow successfully in the warmer waters around Korea. So if you're into hepari nengche, start eating a lot more of it.
Not sure I'm very fond of that diet.
Fantastic. All right. Colin, what theme would you like to talk about today?
Oh, well, I was thinking about the missiles and stuff, but we already covered that. And, Kim Jong Un went on some naval visits again. But maybe we talk about this new luxury mall in Pyongyang. It's an NK Pro story, but still, I think we can discuss it a bit.
Sure. Where is it in Pyongyang?
So this is on I guess what's probably been changed. The name, it's right next to Tongyil Market, which means Unification Market, which I'm sure they're changing the name of it.
They are, yeah. That's out of fashion now.
And so this is a mall with a lot of history. It's like a tower building with then a 5-story building underneath it. It's right on the riverfront, the Taedong riverfront, and it was built since 2012, I believe.
Oh, so it's been under construction for quite some time.
It was under construction for a long time.
Yeah.
It had direct connections to a Singaporean company called OCN.
When you say direct connections, what do you mean?
They were involved in the construction, the investment.
Wow.
And this was a kind of a long saga that I don't remember all the details of, but it then stalled. The construction stalled for a long time. And then it finally opened up now as the Ryugyong Golden Plaza.
That's okay. And Ryugyong, of course, being an ancient name for the city of Pyongyang, and also the name given to that massive pyramid-shaped hotel that was never finished. So what's in this luxury mall?
So this opened up in 2022, but then it kind of, they still added to it, and now it's got a bunch of luxury shops from foreign brands that just opened up last year. And so the thing about this is we've got these photos that were taken by a visiting group of Chinese entrepreneurs.
Okay.
And that's kind of a separate story, but basically a group of 10 or so Chinese entrepreneurs made the first such trip into North Korea since the pandemic in January. So,
and is this kind of like a business delegation to look for opportunities?
Chinese DPRK China Chamber of Commerce is what they were called when they met the Chinese ambassador in Pyongyang. But when they went to this mall, they had a sign up saying, "Welcome, delegation of Chinese entrepreneurs." So it's assumed that they're there to seek out investment opportunities. Yeah. And of course, that is not allowed under UN sanctions, which China is subject to, and North Korea.
And which China also signed on to at the United Nations Security Council.
Yeah, right. So a couple things just about the delegation. You know, they're in there, there was no quarantine. Yes, they are. So this basically shows that North Korea, as we've seen with a bunch of other delegations, they're allowing people in, but of course there's no tourism and no other type of pre-pandemic levels of entry. But it shows that they're not afraid of the virus. They're just keeping close tabs on who they want to come into the country. But anyway, so they posted all these photos from inside this mall. There's like a Huawei smartwatch shop that's against sanctions. There's a luxury watches from European brands, Swiss brands. There's cosmetics floor. There's other electronics. So basically, this says a couple things. This shows that the demand for this type of stuff is still high in Pyongyang. There's this elite class of people that with money that are living this lifestyle that is completely different than what state media says is the national goals of communism and socialist living. And you know, just earlier this month, Kim Jong Un went up on stage and said, "Our economy is total trash." He's like, in his many words, he's like, "The whole country has not developed in decades. All we're doing is developing Pyongyang. We have a wealth gap, not only between Pyongyang and everywhere else, but between areas inside every single city in the country." So he's saying all these things openly, and then he goes up and he visits this mall secretly to go shopping or whatever he does, and we don't know what he did on this visit because they didn't report in state media.
But how do we know he visited?
How do we know he visited?
So one of the photos of the front of the mall, the entrance, there's a red plaque above the door
that says he's been here.
That says Pyongyang and Kim Jong Un, and then a date. And the date says it's hard to read, but it says either Juche 112 or Juche 113, which corresponds to 2023 or 2024. And then it looks like January 11th. So it was either this month or January last year.
And one of the questions I have is this mall intended for the elites, North Korean elites, or for visiting tourists?
It can be both, basically. Right. So in the past, with other types of malls, there's this Daesung department store on the other side of Pyongyang, and that was open in 2018 and 2019. So there were a lot of instances of tourists and other people going there, and I saw a lot of organic videos taken from inside, and there's a lot of North Koreans in there shopping around. I don't know how many of them are buying and how many of them are browsing, but tourists go there plus domestic.
Can I ask a question as well? So you're saying that this Chinese delegation brought all those goods, all the smartwatches and everything to North Korea to sell to the local elites, basically.
This delegation, there's no connection between them and the products that were in there, but that's another part of the story is that there's a company that was formed last year in Dandong in China that says on their business registration websites in China that says that their main enterprise is supplying everything to 30 stores within this mall. So that's why out in the open, you know. But this delegation didn't bring all this stuff. It's assumed that they're there to see what they can do with this space. Maybe it didn't look full, so maybe there's empty spaces that they can invest in, or maybe it's just, you know, part of the tour.
What are your thoughts on how they can proceed business-wise with North Korea, whether it's lucrative at all, or whether it's going to make them any cash?
There's
Well, and the context there is that over the years, Chinese businesses have been attracted by the prospect of making money in North Korea, but have often been disappointed and have complained that they weren't able to make a lot of money and that there were barriers to operations and they had to use certain exchange rates and things like that. So, yeah, go on, Colin.
Yeah, there's a group of people that you see publicly posting a lot on Chinese social media, and then another group of people that we don't have eyes on. But it seems like a small group in general of people who are very enthusiastic about this type of opportunity. Maybe it's small deals. Maybe it's the kind of thing that they think can turn into something big someday, so they want to keep their roots. But just for example, you got one guy who's been going in for years and years, since before the pandemic, making small deals here and there. And right now, he just went to Pyongyang and he posted, he was in a hot pot restaurant that was jam-packed with people. This is not your normal class of people. These are the wealthier class in an office tower in Pyongyang.
These are not the people concerned about the 500 kilometers of new fencing on the coast of North Korea.
Presumably not. Yeah.
Sometimes elite people defect, but sure. And he's posting about how, wow, this hot pot restaurant is really jam-packed right now, but comparing it to hot pot restaurants back home, there's no table-side tablet ordering system. I'm going to sell the North Koreans the table ordering system.
Right.
This is the kind of thing that, like, they go into North Korea, they see how similar it is to China's development, and they're seeing opportunities everywhere.
Filling in the gaps.
Filling
in the gaps.
Yeah. For this kind of growing wealthy population in Pyongyang,
Right.
there are opportunities everywhere. And then they do invest in apartment buildings and stuff. That's pre-pandemic. I don't know what the status of that is now, but there are big-time investments as well. Yeah.
If I can make a quick side note, I mean, it's very interesting you mentioned this Chinese delegation coming in, visiting a luxury mall this week, February 9th. We're supposedly going to see a group of Russian tourists enjoy a ski holiday.
At the Mashigyeong Pass?
Is it
Yes.
on?
Yeah.
I mean, presumably it's on. I haven't heard any news that suggests it's not happening.
And there's nothing to suggest they're afraid of it or anything. It should go on.
Yes, so the context is here that the Russian organization, right?
Right.
They announced they're going to organize a trip for...
They are fully booked. 100 people are going.
100 people.
and
It's all journalists or some
No,
Oh.
journalists.
Tour.
Well, when I talked to this travel agency, they said that about 70 people are just legit people from all across the country, and about 30-ish will be some kids and journalists.
Well, I hope for their sake that they have Medivac insurance.
Yeah. But the interesting part to me, I mean, I cover humanitarian affairs and human rights, is that groups like UNICEF, they really, really want to get their staff on the ground. And also, the World Health Organization, they want to get people back in who have been, the last 8 workers have been expelled, or actually they weren't expelled, but they left.
They left, but they
2021.
couldn't replace new staff.
They couldn't replace their new staff, so they've been sending aid to North Korea, not being able to control what happens to the aid on the ground.
Yeah.
And these people working for these organizations are desperate to get in. And for
North
me,
Korea's not desperate for them.
No, for me, it's quite interesting to see how long North Korea can play this game of allowing tourists, allowing trade delegations back in. At the same time, how long will will organizations like UNICEF accept that? You want our aid, you want the goods, but we cannot enter. Like I'm really curious now. Is like the moment of tension is really rising in that
I have
field.
a question as well, but do they want this help? Do they need this?
Well, they're accepting
aid?
the physical aid.
Yeah,
they're not accepting the people to come in.
What it looks like right now is that they do want the help. Yesterday, I covered a UNICEF report that basically stated that the clinics nationwide do not have enough medicine to treat childhood diseases, and they base this information on North Korean UNICEF employees. So basically, the North Korean staff is signaling to UNICEF, hey, we need medicine. So, yes, they need the goods. They want the goods. But, Kim Jong Un presumably does not want the nosy foreigners to see what the dire situation is, perhaps outside of the capital. So I'm really curious to see how long North Korea can play this game.
Not to argue at all, but just I wanted to add a little note here too. But actually, we've been seeing a lot of medicines and medical supplies coming into North Korea from China. It's millions of dollars worth. supplies, and it's very it's significant numbers. So at the same time, I think it kind of allies with the state policy of improving child mortality and all these little things like nutrition and stuff. So clearly, the state pays a lot of attention to this to this issue, but at the same time, yeah, it's quite of a dilemma when they can't let international organizations in.
Well, yeah, I guess it's an opportunity for Russian and Chinese aid organizations and charities and NGOs to step into the breach.
Right.
We'll see how that goes. Okay, anything that you wanted to add on the luxury shop there, Colin? I was thinking about in 2019, tourists were taken to one of the department stores in Pyongyang. I forget which one it is now, but there was a whole section in that, sort of multiple floor section in that store that was reselling Swedish furniture from a famous Swedish brand that had obviously not been brought in through normal channels, but perhaps they were reselling things that had come from China. And I wonder whether that same thing would be going on now in the new what's it called, the Ryugyong Golden Mall?
Yeah, Golden Plaza.
Golden Plaza, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, this is all presumed to be third-party sales. I mean, none of these stores are branded. I didn't see what the storefront was for the Huawei, but I don't believe it's a Huawei branded store. They just have a Huawei branded section, and it's very easy to get away with this. You'd have to do a real deep investigation to find out if people from these companies have links to North Korea, but they will not be doing this in the open.
Right. So,
and even there's another weird thing, which there was an electric car showroom which opened up on the Hwasong Street last year.
Oh, so not in that building, but elsewhere.
Yeah, elsewhere. Okay. And it's a domestic brand, but these are straight up BYD cars made a Chinese brand. And they just put a new...
Are they rebadging Chinese made?
Actually, yeah, I didn't actually see if they rebranded the cars themselves, but the store brand is a North Korean brand. So they're almost always this kind of third party, different level sales. Chinese companies are playing this balance. I wouldn't doubt that some companies are working directly through some kind of intermediary, but you have to prove that. And
do we have any updates on the ongoing fallout from Kim Jong Un's December 31st speech putting an end to peaceful dreams of unification? Any news on that?
Since they knocked down the monument,
right now they still haven't announced it, have they?
No, and I think
that's weird.
I forgot who brought this up, but it's about. I mean, I've seen multiple people talk about how it's about domestic messaging has to be right on such an issue. It is sensitive. There is a legacy of people wanting unification in their hearts, and they're taught this up until last month or whatever. So could be. I'm interested to see if something ever comes out about domestic propaganda, like internal propaganda.
Yeah.
But no, they haven't reported on this. I've been looking in satellite imagery as recently as February 4th.
Yes.
About their promise to, quote unquote, irrevocably sever, or I forget the word, the rail line, the inter-Korean rail line. And they didn't specify which one, but it's...
Right, because it's on both coasts.
Oh, it's also presumed that it would be the one at Kaesong.
Okay.
But I didn't see any obvious sign in the satellite imagery. Maybe it's harder to see than the Unification Monument in the kind of medium resolution imagery, but I didn't see any sign that they knocked down the bridge that goes right to the north of the border or anything like that. So it's unclear yet what they'll do with that. And I have a feeling that they'll want to play it not so irrevocably.
I've been thinking about the destruction of the arch of the three great principles of unification, whatever, the Unification Arch with the two ladies touching their hands over the road from Pyongyang to Kaesong. I've been thinking about that, and you just brought up the important point there, Colin, about the internal messaging may need to be massaged more carefully than the message to the outside world. Now, of course, North Korea, before demolishing the arch, they announced it basically to the rest of the world.
And domestically.
Okay, so they did
Kim's
say
speech was run in the Rodong Shinmun.
Including that part?
Yeah.
Okay, all right. But then it's interesting that they haven't yet shown the footage or the pictures of this domestically, that the arch has been destroyed, but they know that the rest of the world, South Korea, the US, whatever, is watching through satellite photography. So they're, in a way, they kind of are signaling to the rest of the world, but through a passive way, because they know that people like you will be analyzing these photos and will see it happening.
Yeah, and that's just a symbolic move anyway. You can argue what the point is, but yeah, I don't know, what is the question exactly?
It was more an observation that this is the first time that I can think of North Korea sending a signal through a passive way to the outside world before it actually announces it in its own media. Right? Normally, we would expect something to come out through the media, and then you would see signs of it. But here
they do that with military stuff all the time, though. Like they'll do an engine test, which they know someone will probably pick up on, but they don't announce it, and that signals something that they're kind of working on with their missiles. And I don't know, it's just a whole topic about why sometimes they deliver a message through state media and why sometimes they don't. It's very confusing.
But I think Colin is right. In this case, it's a big enough event that at some point it will have to be announced, right?
Right, because
I don't know. I don't know. It could just be an internal propaganda. There's plenty of stuff that goes around internally that we don't know about.
Everyone, presumably, a lot of North Koreans know this arch as a symbol of Pyongyang. At least people in Pyongyang will know.
But maybe they can control it better through internal propaganda. Maybe it's at a meeting and they raise it. They say Kim Jong Un promised it. It's been destroyed. Maybe they don't show pictures or anything. Maybe it's just kind of to control the message and then to like give warnings about what they should and shouldn't. You know, I don't know if it's explicit or not. And then maybe they won't talk. But if they just put it on the front page of the Rodong, then people are gonna like talk about it.
Right.
Maybe I don't know. I'm just guessing.
Yeah.
But maybe they just want to control it more, and maybe they don't want it to be so visceral. Maybe it's enough to just say it's gone, and it's there, and then it's gone. Is a lot better than like knocking it down, because that's kind of maybe unnecessary from the domestic perspective.
have we seen the names of any other institutions or bodies being changed, or any other sort of rebadging, renaming?
There's
of
a
things?
lot. I think it's not totally worth our time to keep track of it at this point, but I think most of it is going to be changed. I mean, if they're not just going to keep the name like Tongil Market, it's going to be changed. They're going to change the name of the streets. They're going to change they're blurring out the peninsula on TV now whenever they re-air old music videos that used to have it. It's like, it's just their line now. And so everything is going to be changed, I'm sure.
Okay. All right. Well, we have time for one more story or theme to talk about before we wrap up today's roundtable. Anton, I believe you're working on an interesting interview. Can you give us a little preview of what we can expect when this story gets filed in the next day or two?
Well, so we just discussed that this first Russian group in many years is going to visit North Korea. They're going to Pyongyang and then to this Moscow ski resort on the East Coast. And before that, we reached out to this incredibly interesting person, a Russian guy who went to North Korea twice, but it's not very surprising, but as a teenager. And he spent 2 summer breaks.
He went on one of those kids camps.
Exactly,
Summer
the
camps.
Sondowon children's camp.
Wow.
And he went there twice. He spent 2 summer breaks there. And he shares his experience of how it was, what to see, what to expect, his little adventures. He talks about how North Koreans, what their attitude was towards Russian kids.
Wait, so these camps have North Korean youths and foreign youths mingling together?
Very good question, because yes, indeed. So they try, at least before the pandemic, they try to maintain this international crowd. So there would be Russians, like regular tourists, like some kids just, their parents just would send them to summer camp, like any other parents would do. Like, hey, what's wrong about it? It's just a North Korean camp. I mean, and also there would be like kids of the Russian diplomats stationed in the country.
Oh yeah.
And also kids of elite families, most of them related to Communist Party functionaries from Vietnam, Laos, you name it. Even some, according to this guide, even some royalty from Nigeria or something.
So some African kids were there too. Okay.
African countries were represented as well.
Wow.
And this person talks about his experience, and currently it is very interesting how life basically tosses everything around. He went to North Korea. He actually never got really that into North Korea. He studied Cambodia, and he researches Cambodia at a graduate level right now. He speaks perfect Khmer, and he escaped Russia because of the well, of the Kremlin's policies towards Ukraine and the military
The special
campaign.
military operation.
Exactly, let's call it that way.
Okay. he didn't want to get drafted, basically.
He didn't want to get drafted, apparently.
Oh, gosh. At these camps, do they do any farm work, any building, any labor?
Well, I cannot disclose too much because then I wouldn't have a peace, right? So
okay,
I will just say one thing. One memorable thing that he shared with me, his first day in this camp, all the kids were gathered around at this little square early in the morning, and their ritual was that they had to take broomsticks and sweep the dirt from the pedestal of the statues of the great leaders of the country.
They would trust the international kids to do that?
They showed them, and then they had to kind of participate in this ritual. Then it became
surprising.
Yeah, that is surprising.
Then it became optional. But he said there was a Russian teenager who got really into the Juche spirits, and he actually would go there pretty much every day to clean the statues of the great leaders because
very interesting. And
Juche
how long ago
is in
was
your
this?
heart.
How long ago did he go on these camps?
2 weeks each trip.
Right, but how many years ago?
How many years? Oh, that was 2015 and 2016.
Okay, all
So
right.
quite
So
some-
during the Kim Jong Un era.
Yeah, it's already, Kim Jong Un was already in office.
Oh, well, I'm definitely looking forward to that one. Give us a little teaser. Do you include any information about the prospects of interracial dating at these summer camps?
Wow,
in
that's a
North
good idea. Maybe I should add it.
Korea? Definitely.
And this person's going back on this trip next week?
Oh, yeah, he's not going.
I think he's
He's not
finished
going.
with
He's
North
safe
Korea.
in Canada right now.
Okay, wow. Well, we'll definitely have to look out for that story. And that's coming up in the next couple of days.
Right,
All
that's
right.
true.
Great. Okay. Well, thank you, Anton Sokolin, Ifang Bremer, and Collins Werko for coming on the Roundtable podcast for February.
Thank you.
Thank you. For
Thank
calling us.
you.
Dive deep into the heart of South Korea's most pressing stories with the weekly Korea Pro podcast. Hosted by Jongmin Kim and John Lee, this weekly 15-minute podcast is your source for thorough analysis on all things ROK. From intricate politics to dynamic cultural shifts, we cover it all. Tune in every Friday on KoreaPro.org, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. Korea Pro Podcast, insight, not just information. Ladies and gentlemen, that brings us to the end of our podcast episode for today. Our thanks go to Brian Betts and Alana Hill for facilitating this episode, and to our post-recording producer genius Gabby Magnuson, who cuts out all the extraneous noises, awkward silences, bodily functions, and fixes the audio levels. Thank you, and listen again next time.